A red card should have created controversy only on the pitch, but at the 2026 World Cup, it is pulling FIFA president Gianni Infantino into the center of a much bigger storm. Folarin Balogun was sent off. FIFA initially confirmed that the suspension was automatic. Then, unexpectedly, the ban was suspended and Balogun was allowed to return. UEFA was furious. Norway demanded clarification, and 72 European lawmakers are pushing for a full investigation into FIFA. But this is no longer just a story about one player, one red card, or one match. The real question is this: if FIFA can change the consequences of a red card in the middle of the tournament, can every team still believe that the rules of the game are being applied fairly? At first, this case looked like an ordinary disciplinary controversy at the World Cup. A player received a red card, a national team protested, fans debated, and FIFA handled it through its procedure. But what made the story explode was what happened afterward. FIFA did not just review one incident. They suspended the consequences of the red card, even though the previous suspension had been considered automatic. From that point on, the Balogun case was no longer a question of whether the referee was right or wrong. It became a question about how FIFA operates its rules during an ongoing tournament. If a punishment can be changed midway through, where are other teams supposed to look to know which rules are certain? And that is exactly why Infantino is facing growing pressure from Europe. To understand why this case has become so serious, we need to look back at the sequence of events in the correct order. Everything began when Folarin Balogun, the forward of the United States national team, received a straight red card in the match against Bosnia and Herzegovina. The referee reviewed the incident and made the decision to send him off. Under the usual understanding at major tournaments, a straight red card carries an automatic one-match suspension. At first, FIFA also made its position very clear. This punishment was automatic and was not subject to a normal appeal. That meant Balogun would have to miss the next match, and the remaining teams could prepare on the assumption that the disciplinary decision had been finalized. But then came the turning point. FIFA unexpectedly suspended Balogun's ban under Article 27 of the FIFA Disciplinary Code. Instead of being banned from playing immediately, the punishment was converted into a probationary form for a specific period of time. As a result, Balogun was allowed to play in the match against Belgium. That very moment turned an ordinary red card case into a major controversy. Because the issue was not only whether Balogun had committed a serious foul, the issue was that a punishment once considered automatic could be changed while the tournament was still ongoing. For Belgium, this was a direct shock. For UEFA and many other federations, it was a more dangerous warning sign. If FIFA can create an exception in this case, will the next cases be handled the same way? That is why the reaction from Europe did not stop at confusion. From many sides, FIFA's decision was shocking because it touched a fundamental principle of every tournament. The rules must be known in advance, understood in the same way, and applied consistently. A red card can cause controversy. A referee can be criticized. VAR can make fans furious. But those things still remain within the scope of football. When an automatic suspension is suspended in the middle of a tournament, the story moves to another level. Because at that point, the issue is no longer whether Balogun deserved the red card or not. The issue is this: if FIFA can change the consequences of a red card in one case, then where is the boundary of the rules? UEFA sees this risk very clearly. Once Balogun is granted an exception, every other team can use that very case to demand similar treatment. If another player receives a red card in the quarterfinals, the semifinals, or even before the final, their federation can absolutely ask, why was Balogun's punishment suspended, while ours was not? And if FIFA refuses, they will be accused of applying a double standard. But if FIFA accepts, the automatic suspension system will lose its inherent weight. That is what makes this decision dangerous. It does not only resolve one case that has already happened. It could open up a precedent that affects every remaining disciplinary decision at the World Cup. And then, the controversy became even more sensitive when details of a confirmed phone call emerged. According to what has been mentioned, a world leader called Gianni Infantino to discuss the Balogun case. Infantino did not deny this. He explained that, in his role as FIFA president, he regularly receives calls from heads of state, government officials, football leaders, and business figures about many different issues. In theory, A phone call does not automatically prove that there was interference. We cannot conclude that FIFA's decision was influenced simply because Infantino answered the phone. This is a point that needs to be stated fairly. But in a tournament where neutrality is a matter of survival, the timing of the call makes everything difficult to ignore. Because right after that high-level exchange, a rare disciplinary decision took place. Balogun's suspension was suspended. From that point on, the question was no longer simply whether FIFA had the authority to apply Article 27. The question became, who reviewed the case, what criteria were used, and whether every other federation would have access to the same process if they found themselves in a similar situation. That is why the case moved beyond the pitch. When a disciplinary decision appears alongside a political phone call, FIFA cannot simply ask the world to believe that everything was completely independent. They have to prove it through transparency. It was precisely that demand for transparency that made the reaction from Europe so intense. First came UEFA. The most powerful body in European football did not only express disappointment, but also used very strong words to describe FIFA's decision: unprecedented, confusing, and impossible to justify. This is highly significant because UEFA and FIFA usually have to coexist within the same global football system. When UEFA publicly criticizes FIFA in such a forceful tone, it is no longer an ordinary reaction. But UEFA was not only defending Belgium or opposing one specific decision. They were warning about something much bigger: the integrity of the tournament. If the certainty of the rules can no longer be guaranteed, trust in the competition also begins to shake. After UEFA, the Norwegian Football Federation also joined the call for clarification over the decision-making process. This shows that the case is no longer just a complaint from a team directly affected by the decision. It has become a concern for other federations, those that do not want an unclear precedent to exist throughout the rest of the World Cup. Then, the pressure continued to grow when 72 members of the European Parliament signed a letter to the football federations of all 27 EU member states. They called on those federations to formally request that the FIFA Ethics Committee investigate the process that led to the decision to suspend the punishment. What is notable is that the lawmakers were not only talking about football, they referred to the principle of political neutrality in FIFA's own regulations. In other words, they want to know whether a high-level phone call had any influence on the final decision. From one red card, the story has reached UEFA, national federations, and even the European Parliament. And that is why Infantino is no longer facing a simple media controversy. He is facing a real institutional test. However, to analyze this fairly, we also need to look at the arguments FIFA could make in its own defense. First of all, FIFA could say that Article 27 exists for a reason. If the disciplinary code allows a punishment to be suspended or delayed under certain conditions, then using that provision does not automatically mean wrongdoing. A rare decision is not necessarily an illegal decision. FIFA could also argue that the call to Infantino is not evidence of interference. A FIFA president regularly communicates with heads of state, government officials, and stakeholders in international football. The fact that a phone call took place is not enough to conclude that the disciplinary body was pressured. And more importantly, Infantino still insists that FIFA's judicial bodies operate independently. According to this position, the decision on Balogun was not Infantino's personal decision, but the result of an internal legal process. But this is exactly where the biggest problem appears. If FIFA wants the world to believe in that independence, they cannot simply say that the process is independent. They have to show why it is independent. Who reviewed the file? What criteria led to Article 27 being applied? Is there any similar precedent? And if another national team falls into the same situation, will they receive exactly the same treatment? That is the gap Europe is demanding FIFA must fill. And that gap is far more dangerous than the red card itself. Because if FIFA does not explain things clearly, the Balogun case will no longer be seen as an isolated incident. It will become a shadow hanging over every subsequent disciplinary decision in the tournament. From this moment on, every red card, every suspension, and every appeal can be compared against the same question: why was this case not handled like Balogun's? That is the power of precedent. It does not need to change the written rules. A decision only needs to be unusual enough, made at a sensitive enough moment, to make the entire system come under question. For major teams, the question is, can they use this case to put pressure on FIFA if one of their key players gets into trouble? For smaller teams, the question is even more painful. Will they receive the same level of attention, the same speed of handling, and the same flexibility in the law? This is exactly what damages trust. A tournament does not only need rules, it needs teams to believe that those rules are applied equally to everyone. If that trust disappears, every decision afterward can be viewed through a lens of suspicion. FIFA may still believe that they acted correctly from a legal standpoint, but in elite football, being legally correct is not enough. A decision must also appear fair, consistent, and transparent in the eyes of the teams that are competing. And if FIFA cannot prove that, the Balogun case will not just be an exception. It could become the most dangerous precedent of the 2026 World Cup. And that is why the final pressure comes back to Gianni Infantino. He was not the referee who showed the red card. He was also not the one playing on the pitch. But as FIFA president, Infantino is the face of the system now being questioned. When people doubt FIFA's process, the person who must step forward to defend the organization's credibility is him. The pressure is even greater because Infantino has confirmed that there was a call related to the Balogun case. Although he says FIFA's judicial bodies operate independently, the existence of that call makes every explanation subject to even closer scrutiny. In that context, Infantino's reaction in front of the media has also become part of the story. When asked whether he had lost control of the tournament, his answer, "Calm down, relax," could be seen as confident. But for many people, it could also look like a sign that FIFA is underestimating the seriousness of the crisis. The issue for Infantino is not necessarily that he will lose his position immediately. The issue is that he risks losing control of the story. Once UEFA, national federations, and European lawmakers are all demanding answers, FIFA can no longer handle the case as an internal controversy. Infantino now does not only need to defend one decision, he has to defend trust in the entire FIFA system. And that is what makes this story impossible to close, even as the World Cup continues. On the pitch, the matches still have goals, emotion, shocks, and moments that captivate fans. But outside the pitch, FIFA is facing a question bigger than any result. Are the rules of the game still clear and fair enough for everyone? Infantino may want the public to stay calm. FIFA may continue to insist that its disciplinary bodies are independent. But when Europe demands an investigation, when UEFA publicly criticizes FIFA, and when lawmakers raise questions about political neutrality, statements alone are not enough. FIFA needs to explain why Article 27 was applied, how that process unfolded, and whether this standard applies to every national team. Because the biggest threat to the 2026 World Cup is not a red card. The biggest threat is the feeling that the rules can be bent depending on who is behind the request. Infantino is under pressure. Europe wants answers. And until FIFA becomes transparent, this drama is not over. If you think FIFA needs to make the entire process in the Balogun case public, leave a comment below. In your opinion, is this just a valid disciplinary decision or a dangerous precedent for the entire World Cup? Do not forget to subscribe to the channel to follow the biggest dramas in world football.